Do you know about a journal post on DeviantArt titled "Looking for Animators"? It basically was a help wanted ad, asking artists to remake a lost episode or something that may or may not have existed. The journal was probably deleted because the poster got the quota of people and wanted to help keep his project in the dark until it's revealed to the world. If you wish to read about that entry of that journal, it was taken down by an anonymous user. However, someone managed to copy it to the Some Ordinary Gamers wiki, and you can find it in a link in the description below. If you haven't read it, the story is about someone's niece who talks about a strange episode that she saw that scared her away from Looney Tunes. The poster felt inspired by the story, and he wanted to help recreate the entire episode from scratch. When he was questioned on it on DeviantArt about the journal and the project, he simply told people he wanted to wait until it was finished to answer any more. I happen to know who the user of this project is, but I don't want to be responsible for any harassment that may happen to him. I'm sorry if this turns anyone away. While this entry is entirely easy to dismiss due to the fact that there's no evidence for this episode and the amount of details they gave are vague to when it was launched or how it could have even gotten onto the air. In fact, the best explanation he could have given was, "My sister probably made it up." But how? I mean, imagination. But what happened to me says otherwise. Before I even knew about the episode, I was browsing Steam, a digital video game service, and looking through the greenlight section. Of all the odd ways to leak something, it was done through the use of Steam. If you don't believe me, Steam opened up the gateway to where anything can get submitted. Most of it's trash with low-budget games, as you can see on Jim Sterling's channel, with low effort put into them. It was risky to buy something that you didn't know about, and a lot of users fell into the trap of paying money for something that was simply ripped off another site or using pirated assets. During my search for the Lolzy game, I stumbled upon a pending game titled simply labeled Goodbye Grandma. The thumbnail of the game showed a 3D model of a grandmother facing the viewer. She didn't look sad, happy, or upset, but was simply staring off to space as if she had some form of dementia. I assumed the model was from the Unity asset store with no modifications done to it, but trying to search for it didn't really get me any results. Upon entering the game's page, there was only one screenshot and a small trailer. The screenshot was the same as the thumbnail, while the trailer played something entirely different than what I was expecting. It played a scene from the show that I was familiar with. At least I tried remembering where it was from, but after a few seconds I noticed that was stolen footage from a show that my nephews loved. Baby Looney Tunes, if I recall correctly. Baby Bugs and Baby Daffy enter a room that looks like some sort of weird and creepy dungeon. It was probably their imagination, but they walk in to find all kinds of cages containing nothing in them. Shortly they find Baby Sylvester, who happened to be locked up in one of them. The cage is rigged with electrical wire and looked completely out of the ordinary for a toddler show. This trailer ended with Sylvester telling the two to stay back. None of this seemed cute or innocent. In fact, the whole way it was shot was very odd, long, and disturbing shots, without any chains and camera pans and in some sort of filter. I couldn't really figure out what it was. I was baffled when I saw this, and out of curiosity, I decided to vote for the game to get greenlit. I showed the page to a couple of my friends, and even they were confused by what they had seen. This wasn't a game. It was an episode of a mediocre show trying to find itself onto Steam. I'm sure this lawsuit was going to happen if the thing hadn't been taken down shortly after its post. A couple days after finding the page, I searched around the Looney Tunes wiki to look for some information on the footage. But there was no mention of this dungeon or the dungeon episode anywhere. In fact, I've read every single synopsis for every single show to find nothing related to this. I pondered on joining the Looney Tunes forums to talk about the show, but that quickly changed my mind. It was a stupid idea for me to sign up just to talk about a toddler show. It's like me signing up to join a My Little Pony forum. It's just not worth the time, and the more you think about it, the more stupid it seems. After a little searching, I was about to drop the entire thing until I was told about the journal by one of my friends who had discovered the thing getting posted around the internet. I was surprised to find that it fit with the trailer I had seen, and I discovered who the poster was shortly after. I messaged him trying to ask if he was responsible for that submission, but he replied telling me that he wasn't stupid enough to spend money on a stunt like that. None of the footage belonged to him and his group. A few weeks after my search, I checked my library of Steam games when something caught my eye. Goodbye, Grandma? It was there despite it getting taken down. I was in fact dumbfounded and intrigued. I wonder if my visit to the page caused it to show up on my list. I knew of the dangers of checking things like this, but I was going to be getting a new computer soon anyway. When the game started, a menu popped up showing an image from the Baby Looney Tunes show. It was just a picture of baby Bugs at the top, with the rest of the cast at the bottom. There were only two options. I know Total Biscuit would have a flip out, or a freak out rather. Start episode and exit. It was here that I found out Goodbye Grandma was actually the title of the episode. I invited a few of my friends to watch this with me. They were of the same group that I had shown this page to in the first place. The episode begins much like how it was described, the cast playing in a playroom, but there were also many things that Denise left out. While she accurately described the episode for the most part, it was only a brief synopsis compared to what I'm seeing. There were many details and things left out, which I assumed was due to poor memory. Taz is chasing Petunia Pig. He rushes into the playroom and says that he's hungry. Lola told Taz that he had just eaten, but Taz ignores her and continues pursuing Petunia, despite the concerned Lola. She shrugged it off, and assumed that Granny would stop anything bad from happening, and they continued playing. It then shows Bugs and Daffy playing ball. They're passing it back and forth until Sylvester rushes in and tries taking it from the two. It was there that I noticed how unlikable Daffy was in this episode. He was selfish, but he acted at his worst. Daffy showed little concern for others and told Sylvester to go away because they were too busy playing. Sylvester runs off and Bugs tried going after him, but is stopped by Daffy, who just wants to continue their game. He tells Bugs that Sylvester is only overreacting, being hypersensitive? Now that's a term I don't think I would hear in a toddler show. And that I'll be fine. Bugs lets out a sigh and gives in to Daffy's demands. I know that I may be over-exaggerating and hypersensitive to the situation myself, but this entire scene reminded me of my younger sister getting into an abusive relationship. Or more of those kindergarten bullies that I myself got into. The next scene shows Sylvester trying to hide from everyone since Daffy's scolding worsened him, making him believe that everyone now hated him. His hiding places were poor, and he tried hiding beside a bunch of boxes, but is quickly found by Melissa. Next, he tries hiding under the table, but is found by Lola. The final hiding spot was in his bedroom. Not Granny's bedroom, but the bedroom belonging to the entire toddler cast. Sylvester thinks he's safe, but is found by Tweety, who happened to be in the same room. Tweety looks concerned and tries to talk with Sylvester. Sylvester's expression changes to a look of hunger, and immediately it cuts to the next scene. Sylvester is now running down the hallway. The camera appears to be in a twisted fashion, almost in a snuff film-esque way. It's hard to really describe, but in those horror movies that a lot of you probably have seen, if you tilt the camera, it makes it look twisted almost. Almost as if the entire perspective of the shot was warped in some way. Looking behind to see if anyone was following during this, a faint crying could be heard. I was surprised that I was even able to hear it, but the crying belonged to Tweety and not Sylvester. The look on Sylvester's face brought unease to one of my friends who happened to be watching. He pointed out that it looked like different animators had collaborated together during this production, as the faces or facial expressions seemed to be drawn differently than the way the normal show was. Sylvester enters the kitchen and is noticed by their caretaker. Sylvester finally decides to confess and tell Granny that he wants to eat Tweety. The next scene shows Tweety crying while Grandma's tending to the wound on his wing. I always assumed that it was a her, but apparently it's a his. Tweety is sobbing and talking about the betrayal. Granny's dialogue to follow up Tweety's sobbing made the entire episode way more grim-dark than it needed to be. She mentioned about how friends would eventually betray each other and how it was a part of growing up. She didn't even try to be positive, almost as if she was explaining the grimdark reality that of what life is. Friends drift apart, things change, and guess what? It sucks. Looks like Granny was in a troubled relationship herself and suffered trauma because of it. It switches to Bugs and Daffy a few days later after Sylvester runs off. Bugs is now furious at Daffy and no longer wants to give in to his demands. Despite the disappearance, Daffy stayed stubborn and tried to stop Bugs yet again. Bugs finally snaps and threatens him. "If you don't help me, Sylvester, I'll never play with you again." Daffy huffs and helps Bugs in the search for him. They check various furniture, tables, and eventually they find a room that wasn't explored. This room was the exact same dungeon showed in the trailer. They walk inside, look around it. It looked symbolic. Cages were hanging on the walls, but were empty. The only cage containing someone was Sylvester, who was sobbing. The wiring was, again, still around it. But this wasn't like normal wiring that you would see. In fact, it was a lot more crude than that. The plastic plating around the wire was completely stripped off, only leaving the copper coating wrapped around it as if it was some sort of vine that just wrapped around the bars of the cage itself. Almost a metallic prison. Almost something you would see from a industrial steampunk thing. The two are obviously freaked out about this and begun to question Sylvester, asking what did he do to get in this 3-day timeout. "I'm a monster! Don't you see that? Why didn't Granny warn you?" A new scene not talked about in the journal plays out. Tweety is in the first-person perspective, and he's trying to talk to Sylvester, with all the toddler beds in the background. This was back when Sylvester was caught for the 3rd time earlier on. He gets the same look of hunger on him, same look of hunger in him, and chases after Tweety. He tried to find a place to hide under the bed when Tweety turns around. Sylvester is there and immediately lunges at him. Daffy wanted to keep Sylvester locked up, and this act was a straw that broke the camel's back for Bugs. He starts getting physically violent with Daffy. Lola is shown running into the room to check up on the pair when she sees the fight and runs off. Bugs knocks Daffy out, and Granny enters the room and takes Sylvester. This is her final appearance. Bugs then leaves the room to find that the house is decaying. Everything looks as if it's in bad shape. If he had traveled into the future, it would be odd to say the least. Bugs tried calling out to his friends, but none of them were to be seen. He leaves to search for them. Outside, he follows a pathway. In the background, there are a few pieces of scenery, such as trees and houses that looked like they belonged in the wacky land. It was a strange mix of styles, like what happened with Sylvester early on. Along the pathway, Bugs runs into several friends, but they look a lot different than they did before. He finds Wile E. Coyote trying to catch the Roadrunner, Petunia crying for help as she's dragged off by Taz, presumably to get Ian. He reaches the end of the path and finds all of his friends. They've all gone insane, or at least gone different than what they used to be. Sylvester, who somehow escaped a cage, is trying to catch something when he grabs it. It is revealed to be a random mouse. It went to a close-up of Sylvester's face as he starts growing faint, smiles sadistically at the prey he caught, opens his mouth and swallows the mouse whole. It was quite disturbing. Because in a normal Looney Tunes episode, if this was seen, of course it would be a bit more morbid than the casual episode, but it wouldn't be as bad. But due to the fact that this is being seen associated with something that was usually more tame, made the impact a lot worse. They all turned into their twisted versions of their adult counterparts, things that weren't accurate to the original characters. I wish I could describe everyone, but I can't remember since there were so many on screen at once. All I know is that Sylvester looked rabid, and all of them seemed to be drawn in a very realistic manner. For example, if the creature had fur, you could see the fur textures clearly, almost as if they painstakingly animated every little blade of fur. If the thing had skin, you could see the pores directly on it, in a very odd, almost rotoscoped-looking animated sense. Bugs starts to back away as his friends beckon him to surrender. He runs away and they give chase. Bugs gets old memories at this point, old screenshots and what appear to be short clips from the actual show start to play in the background, slightly turned down in opacity so you could still see the running animation. That's when the mutated version of the other characters start surrounding him. Bugs begins laughing and starts changing himself. Everything fades to black, and the episode's final line is spoken. This is the price of maturity. White text pops up as this line's spoken. Don't expose yourself to society. Isolation will protect your innocence. The file then closes. Was that how the producers looked at adulthood? I was kinda shocked at what I had seen. We talked about the episode for a while, and we even wanted to view it again, but the entire thing glitched. Every attempt to rewatch the episode ended in an error message telling us that the file could not be found, followed by Steam itself crashing. Once it loaded back up, it was no longer on the library. Sadly, we didn't have any luck of viewing it again. The game is still in my library, but it's now impossible to start up again. And I'm sad to say, but this is where I must leave you guys off. I have no more information on this. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm your host at Creepy Reading, and you may notice that the new art is brought to you by, a spoonful of creatures. You can find her Tumblr down here. Nonetheless, why don't we dig into this story? It's good. I like it. I mean, I would have to say it is very nice to get a sequel story and see it done right. I've seen a lot of sequel stories, and I've in the past have tried to avoid them and do my best to avoid them, simply because sequel stories just seem to not work. As I Hate Everything said in his I Hate Creepypastas video, you know that once you bury a thing so deep and, you see something so much, it just stops becoming scary. And I don't want to ruin the scares for you guys. Nonetheless, this story seems to know how to do a sequel story right. For example, it expands upon the original story, gives more details, and leaves us with possible questions. For example, was this the original story, or was this the aftermath of the original dude's possible meddling and animation team? I mean, in the story there are some clues. For example, the line, It looks as if it was drawn by different animators, could be one thing. Perhaps they found the original episode and added to it. The little girl also seems to leave out details that he seems to be able to fill us up on. Not to mention, he reaffirms his credibility by saying other people watched it, and he doesn't say things like he puked because, rats were being eaten. It's kept in a very realistic manner. It's described as how realistically a lost episode could be described. He changed some situations and he, basically made it into a nice, realistic, believable story. Not to mention that whole bit about the Steam Greenlight. Not many stories actually use this. They simply say, haunted file on Steam. Look at how scary Steam is. Look at how scary my achievements are. Give me a break. But when you're talking about something as indie as Steam Greenlight to the point where all you have to do is spend $100 to get onto it, honestly, I can see how that could even happen. I can see someone putting something like that on Steam Greenlight, and I could see it getting greenlit. And it adds a little bit of a supernatural element by simply giving you some ideas how it could be gotten by ill-gotten mean ways, like a Steam glitch or something. I don't know. All I know is that the story is better in some aspects, but it's also worse. For example, the story talked about mutation, and whenever I think the word mutation, I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And the less I talk about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on this show, the better. I kinda wish he used some different choices of words in some areas, and to be honest, it does hurt the story quite a bit. I would have liked him to describe more grimdark scenes. You're telling us more about the product, but you're not quite giving us enough to latch onto to be sufficiently scared. There is some more details that make it rather unnerving, but if you actually describe the situation where Tweety was actually attacked in detail and actually described it being a bit more violent than one normally would have seen, that would have been actually unnerving and a quite powerful scene, because in the past you used restraint and didn't talk about it, and now here it is coming out of nowhere. It would have been freaking awesome. But sadly, we don't get that, and we get another good story. And I'd like to emphasize the word good. It's a lost episode that avoids cliches and actually uses new concepts, ideas from the modern age to actually revolutionize the way that he wrote his creepypasta. And for that, I thank him. I just wish that the story was better and reflected that. This has been your host, That Creepy Reading, signing off. You should be able to see the story on the wiki soon, as this was sent to me by an anonymous user. I don't know who it was, but they contacted me through Facebook using a picture that you couldn't, there was no picture on it, it was just the blank thing. So, I don't know, it was a lovely little request, and I was more than happy to do it. If you want to submit requests to me in the future, you could sub to my Patreon. By sending $5 a month, I'll read any story of your choosing. However, if you don't want to do that, that is fine. Patreon actually only helps me continue creating content like this for you guys, and you should be seeing more videos from me now that I don't really have to worry about these other big projects. As if you want to actually just suggest a story as a way of saying, hey, this is a good story, you should look at it, then I'll do my best to take a look at it. Till then, this has been your host, That Creepy Reading, signing off.